with the questions of sorry, this her research engages with the questions of art, space, materiality, and social meaning. So, making today's discussion both unique and very insightful. She'll be speaking on the topic what do Ambedkar statues signify Ambedkar Jayanti on land, materiality, and culture. So, this topic encourages us to reflect on how statues of Babasaheb are not merely physical structures, but they are also powerful symbol of identity, resistance, memory, and assertion in public spaces. So, we have a very simple structure of the session. First, we will have the speakers talk, which will be followed by an interactive question answer session. So, it's my humble request to all the participants to note down all your questions during the talk. You can ask them at the end of the session. And also, please keep yourself on the mute so that we have a session which runs smoothly. Yeah, with that, it's my privilege to invite our speaker, Aatika, to begin today.
Hi, Jai Bhim, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, Aatika.
Okay, I'll just start sharing my screen. But meanwhile, thank you, Swapnil and Janvi, for the introduction. And thank you, Mangesh, for putting the second Ambedkar Intellectual Summit together for all of us young emerging scholars. And a small thanks to also my fellow co-presenters. Um, And I think today I'll be talking about the widespread phenomena of the desecration of Ambedkar's statuary in contemporary North India. Is the PowerPoint also visible now?
Yes, it is visible.
Okay. And we'll talk about how desecration works as a method when it comes to Ambedkar statues and the entanglements of Ambedkar statues to cultural philosophy and legal jurisprudence. Um, And the aim of my paper today is to just foreground the virulent yet banal iconoclasm of Ambedkar statues and to see if we can propose an anti-mimetic aesthetic idiom in the emerging overview of anti-caste cultural philosophy and see what are the relation Ambedkar statues enable to land, materiality, and culture broadly around us. But before I delve into that, we can see a small video.
Do we have audio in this video? Or
No, it's just the, yeah.
okay.
So as we could see, like the video really tries to highlight the very commonly widespread prevalence of Ambedkarite iconography all around us in various cities and towns. But at the same time, along with this multivalent commemoration, we have rising incidents of also desecration of specifically Ambedkarite iconography. I let the video play without sound as I cover a little more on desecration. In fact, this desecration is not just limited to South Asia and India. It has been happening in other places as well globally where there are Ambedkar statues. And the connections is not just of the geographical nature. Recently, a statue was desecrated in Punjab and it was smeared with black paint on the cage of the statue, Trump Zindabad, which means victory to Trump. So there are these global connections that statues enable and that must come under the purview of art historical analysis, which is the goal of the paper. Um, as we all know, in the journalistic media space, there is ample news, as we see in the image, that filters in every day on the desecration and erasure of statues and also just other various kinds of Dalit material, heritage, and culture. Um, in both remote, rural, semi-urban, and urban sites. In this way, innumerable statues of Babasaheb are desecrated but are also installed every day, many of which are surrounded by protective caging as they are routinely and persistently defaced. And this makes this entire economy of Ambedkar statue very unique in some ways as one of the only instances of protective caging across the globe. And as one of the few leaders with a very bold iconographic presence, the visual impact of this statuary creates a highly charged encounter, as most of us already know and have photographs with Ambedkar statues. Um, and then a very famous anecdote that is passed by Dalit ancestors and other like elders in our community is the refusal of Dr. Ambedkar against commemorative iconography that would immortalize him. Hence, he very reluctantly stood impatiently in front of the sculptor Brahmesh Wagh in 1948 in Bombay. And the session had to come to an abrupt end due to heavy rains in the city on that day. However, it is from that unfinished mold that Wagh made that all the other later statues of Ambedkar were installed, designed, and built across our cities. And this journey of Ambedkar to Baba Saheb across the globe is a testament to his omnipresent iconization from the 1980s till now by his beloved followers who are keen to install his popular statues across the breadth of the nation and the globe. These ubiquitous statues, I say, serve as dense markers, point to the central role played by socio-spatial culturalization of caste around the lives of Dalits. Yet, the scholarship that currently exists on this nascent aspect of aesthetics kind of limit itself mostly to an analysis of state-built monuments and big bronze colossal statues of anti-caste leaders, catering to a very formal analysis of the artwork. The bronze statues that we see in the images, they dot the urban landscape and deploy the language of polish and finesse to become the ideal. However, in the statues that I seek to analyze, there exists a vastly different claim to the public sphere, wherein a subaltern strata of knowledge animates the making and spatial appearance of the statue. The popular representation of Baba Sahib, pointing to a liberatory future with an upraised right hand and holding the constitution in his left, also do dramatic gestures in these statues. He wears bright pink lipstick, is a stout friend, and has frown on his face at times. These statues often play with measurement, design, and expressions, and are rarely treated as aesthetic objects. You will rarely find these statues in a museum around you. However, there is a peak in the desecration of these statues, especially around Ambedkar Jayanti, as we all speak today. Therefore, the intersection of caste, art history, and law needs to be analyzed further along these lines to include artisanal built sculptures, statues, and busts that do not fall prey to the monumental or the colonial mold. Instead, they showcase an anti Memitic language that governs the tender relationship of the statue with its populace. Now, what exactly does the word anti Memitic do here? A majority of these statues that are the focus of this paper, they resist articulation as their material, proposition, and schema appear fundamentally different on the surface. They refuse to mimic the optical consciousness of a Brahminical nation. They rather enjoy appearing grotesque and provincial. The artisans refuse to work through a pre-established mold of a typical Ambedkar statue cast in bronze and fashioned in a factory. The artisanal hand and body overtakes the art historical object based analysis at times here. It is their tacit and embodied knowledge that crafts the armature of the statue, including which mud, paint, cement, clay and steel will be used and when. The refusal to create replicas shows technological adaptability, ancestral knowledge, artistic flexibility, despite little financial viability. Crafting an Ambedkar statue out of imagination and as a matter of passion and pride with your bare hands shows how the artisans self define themselves by asserting an anti mimetic idea through statue making. This artisanal economy has also shifted into new forms of material production and also on social media where making, materiality, and a modern conception of design, fashion, and art illuminate this idea of anti mimesis. Needless to say, these are the hands that built Dalit futures. However, patterns of desecration also show that the hands of the statue are the most attacked, followed by eyes and the Constitution of India, which kind of determines the optical consciousness of the Brahminical society that we see around us. This affects all the concepts of touch, placement, and materiality that govern the commemoration of an Ambedkar statue. Another thing that I'd like to add is the professionalization and skill of these artisans is often contested, and the statues are mostly viewed and categorized as bad objects or kala patthar as if to signify a polluted imperative, especially when they are about to be inaugurated and installed. In this way, we can see how daily interactions of desecration, by focusing on these cultural social inequalities, shape the unique artistry behind Ambedkar statues, and the uniqueness of which is bound to not just a lack of affordance of material, issues of artistic recognition, denial to legal justice, but also historic knowledge forms whose micro history is yet to be written. Because despite these graded hierarchies, Dalit communities have nourished sturdy countercultures comprising a range of art forms that insist on powerful political participation, dynamic aesthetic self fashioning, and a resistance based dialectic. And it is really unfortunate that the same artisanal Dalit communities that sustain this entire economy of caste abolition, cultural assertion, and grassroots development are rarely included in these conversations around culture, heritage, and memorialization. Local interlocutors, including community artisans and activists, remain a deeply precarious position and outside the purview of the English language national media. Often, the desecrated ruins of a disfigured statues are also erased, and in many cases, the statue is caged, as we see, or arrested and placed in police custody for perpetuity as atrocities continue on the community. There exists currently no publicly available media archive for such incidents. This violence, absence, and erasure informs the material culture of Dalits in multifarious ways. The Staturian people both persist in an incessant cycle of ephemerality, endangerment, and appropriation, often with often no land and culture to call their own. This art history, then, in which you understand the symbolic conflation between a caged Ambedkar statue and a desecrated Ambedkar statue behind bars and numerous prisons filled with Dalit bodies, will simply break your heart. At a global level, also, the issue of identitarian iconoclasm in the decolonial context of a mounting challenge to monuments also necessitate our inquiry of Ambedkar statue as urgent and timely, along with the rising memorialization of Dr. Ambedkar statues across the world by Ambedkarites. Um, the key analytical signifiers in this global attempt to map his statuary not just attempt to document and preserve the long history of just statuary in the face of incessant demolishing and defacement of minoritarian heritage by the ruling right wing regime. It also tries to map how Dalit artisanal and activist life worlds are being increasingly rendered precarious with punitive demolitions of millions of statues right now. Therefore, the desecration is a legal method to expel Dalits from their past and curtail all possibilities of a future with dignity, thereby precipitating their political erasure. This architecture of ruin was long perfected by casteist forces who have mobilized many forms of built environment for their right to the land. Desecration thus becomes a careful, calculated assemblage to cleanse the landscape of those who are considered a spatial burden, an existential blemish, where the refusal to mimic the aesthetic political norms allows caste to function as a spatial sensory order. Hence, a need remains to examine the material and political economy of desecration across all its aesthetic, architectural, and emotional registers, and reflect on the strategies of refusal deployed by Dalit communities against such designed ruination. And to therefore craft a sartorial and subversive statue is a counter architectural gesture, I say, and a disobedient spatial constellation that generates resistance, dignity, and self definition. Swapnil, can you also let me know when it's time to stop so that we can allow for a conversation?
Yes, yes, you can start. We have time till 8:30 Indian time.
So, how many minutes is that for me?
You have 90 minutes. Like you have lost
Okay,
your 25 minutes now.
okay.
You have 1 minute.
Um, okay. Also, this iconography of Ambedkar emerges in conversation with the subaltern sartorial expression and design regime. Since realism, representation and form have remained trapped in the matrix of casteism in India. As we think of the vernacular words like chapri, pulingo, mawali, we must also think of these statues that craft a unique style and aesthetic sensibility of self fashioning through bodily articulation, which is loud, flashy, unorthodox, and artisanal. This excess is also seen in the statues, is where this project wants to begin. It is within this subversion that anti mimesis lies, a refusal to not just mimic but resist the optical Brahminical consciousness and understand desecration as a structural method. Here, extravagance in these statues equates to emotional ecology of touch and visibility. These statues do not affirm the caste affirming gaze of all of us. Rather, they counter the Brahminical standards of beauty, taste, and sophistication. To then untether aesthetics from caste is which is why it becomes relevant to talk about Ambedkar statuary today in the domain of art history. These are some other images. And then, just as a testament to the irony of what I am speaking, on 14 October in 2023, I believe, a colossal statue of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was unveiled in Washington, D.C., in the US. This is the largest statue of Dr. Ambedkar so far in the US, and the installation of this statue is being heralded as the actualization of the dream of Ambedkarites the world over. However, in many other parts of the Indian subcontinent, as well as South Asia, as we know, commemorating the memory of Dr. Ambedkar is still a distant dream for the anti caste communities. All of these incidents together demonstrate how iconographic claims are becoming more pronounced each day. These repeated incidents of defacement are a telltale case of caste atrocity, but also of iconophobia and iconoclasm being instrumentalized for a sinister project of erasure of the material culture of Dalit community, often through lethal and violent acts of deliberate destruction stemming from degenerate desires. I think I'm good to end here and we can just open it for a question and answer and a discussion. Thank you.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Aatika. We can have question and answer session now. I'll allow the participants to unmute themselves. This is okay. Okay. Now you can unmute yourself if you want to ask anything. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Aatika. Sorry. Hi, Aatika. It was very good presentation. Just I don't know. I just wanted to add something in your presentation. Like in 1948, the first statue of Dr. Ambedkar installed in Maharashtra when he was alive uh, in Kolhapur city. I think it might be you are already aware, or I just thought to add that comment.
Yeah.
And that
The article in the scroll that talks about this is where I got the information on Brahmesh work. So thanks for sharing that.
yeah, and also there is a long history of the his name is Madhav Bagal, and who was not from the scheduled caste community, he was from Maratha community, well. And he was earlier worked with Shah Maharaj and then with Babasaheb also. And he was the first, like there is, it's called Bindu Square in Kolhapur, which is very famous square where the Fule's and Ambedkar statues are there. And then he was the first person who installed the statue one. And also adding to that point, some days back I was writing about this also, like how Shudras installed the first statue of Babasaheb from 1948 to a tallest statue from Andhra and then in Andhra and Telangana even though that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's the same community fellow has history to demolish Ambedkar statues in the villages also. That is, I just wanted to add that.
No, yes, you're right, Mayur. The history of desecration is highly contested and highly complicated because of how much caste contestations and mobilization affected. And it's neatly never like one caste group. It's mostly sort of an amalgamation of different caste groups at the local level, which makes also the application of law a contested terrain when it comes to desecration. So you're right there. But I did not know that Brahmesh Wag uh, was not the community. So thanks for telling me about that.
So it's not Madhara Bagal. His name is Madhara Bagal.
Yes.
Uh, he's from Satyashodak Samaj person also. He was follower of Phule. And Maharashtra, earlier days, Phule's followers was coming from Maratha community, basically, not from his own caste fellow.
If you have any questions, you can also write in the chat box or raise your hand.
So I think I'm just want to again ask something like, is it your PhD work also, Natika?
Yeah, was that? Yeah, I can see.
It's Mayur.
Um, it's Mayur again.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is also my PhD research. Now I'm a student in art history, but before I did my master's in arts and aesthetics, I did my bachelor's in law, which is why I wanted to look into the intersection of law, art history, and critical caste studies. And therefore, desecration was something close to my lived experience, but also as a disciplinary nexus was under researched. Uh, so much of what we know of desecration comes to us as journalistic, quantitative reports on a desecration has happened here and there, often. Um, which is why I wanted to look into this intersection more and see what this lacuna has to offer in terms of just a theoretical and a methodological intervention also. So which is what I'm trying to do here now in my PhD.
Nice. So it's very interesting, by the way, to see the statue as a not as a symbol also, like in terms of site of confrontation and claim. And also because nowadays also in Maharashtra, it's a huge violence is happening, very organized violence happening uh, on the statues, basically, like putting two idol next to each other, specifically Ambedkar statue and the Shivaji statue. So there is also another recent, not previous development, but it's a new development happening in Maharashtra. So they putting each other against Shivaji's and then Ambedkar, and then make the communal violence around the statue. Yeah, thanks.
Yes, I think Maharashtra and like Tamil Nadu in particular remain highly contested regions when it comes to politics over like iconography and especially statues. Um, and one thing that I didn't really speak about is how like the modes of desecration itself latch onto like the contemporary political situation in ways that are very casteist. Like the form of desecration would be um, to now, like if earlier it used to be to garland the statue with a string of chapels, now it is to demolish it with a bulldozer as per the orders of the yogi government. So these indic modes of like desecration or just very perverse ways of desecrating it via drowning it or electrocuting a statue, and like really has made me think also of like the organized level of attack that you're talking about. That's true.
Yes, Nitin. Yes. Nitin wants to talk. Yes.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I joined in late, so maybe I must have missed the a lot in what was being conveyed here, and I was trying to find the transcript if that is there already on the chat. So one question, maybe it is again tangential, may not be exactly relevant, but whatever I heard in the last few minutes, do we know how this has to be tackled to ensure that our people do not get pulled into what they want us to get into, like into some kind of violence or agitation, so that they have easier means to put them in jail or otherwise. I don't know whether again, because I missed most of the part of the session here, but have you thought about anything related to this? Like, how can we still educate our people and control, irrespective of what happens to these statues? How can it be systematically addressed?
Thank you for the question. I would say that my understanding has definitely has had a slight shift in terms of from looking at iconography and statue installation as about reclamation of land and cultural marker to also thinking of them as contestations to keep Dalit communities under the garb of law and prison. There has been a shift in my understanding, especially now that I'm looking into more historical records of um, how statue building itself has been funded during the colonial times and after 1947 by big corporations like GD Birla was funding many statue installations of Valmiki across northern India, um, and that was to push communities towards a mode of worshipping and ensuring cases of sacrilege and blasphemy keep surrounding the communities and young men remain incarcerated. Um, so what you're highlighting is true, but I'm an art historian. So my job is to look at the relevance of iconography. My job is not to suggest, uh, the solution. around iconographic claims. And I feel the conversation is still really underdeveloped because what iconography serves as a purpose is still not spoken about enough in terms of the theoretical value it has for us, whether it is in a semantic way or in a semiotic way. The sign still has so much to offer us. Ambedkar's body as an isomorphic sign and his refusal to be slotted into a neat um, value order of there is no one Babasaheb. There's so many representational, especially in the artisanal communities. And the other way for me also like a challenge to what you're saying, to think of a new sort of a solution to this is also how it not just the Dalit community, but the artisanal Dalit community remains really at the lower levels of this conversation, where they're making itself as a part of their self-fashioning. So that making will still keep happening. I think the effort honestly must come from the other side of law and governmentality and not from the cultural aspect side. And anyways, I believe like anti-caste conversations suffer from what Dr. Ambedkar said is the curse of the political, where anything that is not about directly religion and society gets bracketed into something not directly relevant. So caste is only seen as a sociological sort of a concept, and cultural inquiries take a back foot. um, that's like my thoughts on what you've asked, but it's a very relevant question.
Thank you. I'm sorry if it was tangential because I missed most of it, but thank you for your answer.
I'm being asked in the chat if Dr. Ambedkar was a capitalist or a communist. I think that's a question open for all of us.
I had a question. Can I go ahead?
Yes.
Yes, please, Pradeep.
Yeah. So thanks for your presentation. I just wanted to, for basically, I don't know if you have followed this news. So today, BJP has announced that they'll be launching a new scheme, which is called the Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Murti Vikas Yojana. And the aim of this scheme seems to be that they want to beautify, develop, and maintain statue of Ambedkar in all 403 FMD constituencies of Uttar Pradesh. So obviously, next year we are going to see elections in UP, and this seems to be coming after yesterday. Yogi Adityanath said that he's going to provide, he announced that there will be symbolic protective umbrellas installed over statues of Ambedkar and other social justice icons across the state. So here we clearly see like a very, the right wing appropriation of this iconography of Ambedkar statues becoming like a clearly political issue, which BJP wants to use and use it for political capital. So how do you see this like in your field work or in your inquiry? Like, have you come across how it becomes a political issue for voting? Because BJP seems to be very concerned about this in Uttar Pradesh. And it seems to be a big issue for them because they've also allocated around 400 crores for this scheme.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think Mayur has also added in part to what I was about to say, which is yes, there are these schemes, but the scheme has come after like some around 8 months ago, there was an order that was issued by the government in UP that said that all statues of Dr. Ambedkar should be removed that are on um, sort of unprotected land, which means that if you don't have the permission to install it, and by default, most statues of Dr. Ambedkar happen to be installed or half commemorated and half installed on lands that are under contestation, which is your government public common land or patta land, as it is called. And the order that the court had come up with in tandem with the UP government said that all these statues will be supplanted, so that and that attempt is even like before this Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Mukti Vikas Yojana was like enrolled, was sort of opened up. I think the attempt has honestly been to not just curtail, but to regulate the space of a very vibrant public sphere of Dalit celebration and joy that the statue marks in some ways. And that public sphere is not just a cultural threat, I would say it's also a material threat because it depends on land reclamation at the end of the day. And most of the FIRs that I've traced that sort of have a long durée and the case has gone on for years. The fight has been around, yes, previously section 125 in IPC, which was about hurting the religious feelings of any class, but it has also been about statutes that are about land and property relations. In this way, I would say that the attempt is not just towards appropriating the gestural sensibility of what Dr. Ambedkar's iconography and statues represent, but it is to completely demolish it. Along with this Yojana program, they have also come up with the, which really shocks me, and I'm still thinking about it. They have come up with the plan, an architectural plan for a park that exactly resembles the park that Mayawati had built in Lucknow. And the plan is to erect colossal big monuments of Savarkar in the same iconographic gesture that Dr. Ambedkar has with his hand upraised and holding the Constitution of India. And I have seen the plan for it, the architectural plan, and I've seen the models and replicas that they're planning to install. And this attempt is not just to change the iconographic sensibility of a people, but also to attack how they self define themselves by saying that this is my space and this is my pride and this is my icon. Um, and this also reminds me of something I read initially, that there was under BSP a spree of statue installation very rapidly, where each day some 500 to 800 statues were being um, sort of sponsored and installed, and there were ceremonies around those statues installation across Uttar Pradesh and the northern Indian belt, simply because the idea was to counter the Hindu right wing's idea of how does one use public space and establish their right to use and consecrate public space, and how does one say that this land is mine, um, and do all sorts of pujas around it. And that idea of installation of statues therefore has extreme entanglements with how a community and people like not just religiously define their belonging, but their idea of also this is my land and this is my duty to my land, which I think the BJP has really well sort of latched onto. And if they have to get into the definitional heart of how Dalit communities relate to Dr. Ambedkar, they understand that cultural mobilization and weaponization of iconography is a fast way to get to that point. So these developments are very concerning, I would say. And this is just the art historical aspect of it. More concerning, perhaps, is if someone were to look into the financial aspect of these developments.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I am Prandip. I asked you the question, was Dr. Ambedkar a capitalist or a communist? The question was that. So, with reference to that statement, I would like to add that now BJP is using Dr. Ambedkar for garnering votes. We are having election on 9 April in Assam, Northeast India, as well as Kerala is also going to polls along with Pondicherry. So the thing is that, so now it's like it is seemed that Ambedkar is being used by the rightist group or the right wing group, that is the BJP or its regional allies. So if you say Bahujan Samajwadi Party doesn't talk about Islamic groups, or they don't talk about Christian communities, they don't talk about Jain communities, they even don't talk about Zoroastrian communities, they even don't talk about like minority communities speaking very minority languages as well as dialects. So don't you think Ambedkar promoted minorities in terms of dialects, or you can say creoles, etc.?
That's a very interesting question. And unfortunately, my training is in art history. So I wish I had an answer for that, but I don't. If anyone else has an answer for that, please feel free to chime in.
Atika, um, hi, this is Sumpi. Thank you for the
Hi.
presentation, of course. And I wanted to know, I think you have mentioned it in your presentation also. I might miss it, I don't know. But could you please tell us more about the specific location of the placement of these statues, like in, yeah, in the wherever, geographical locations, mainly in the center, suburbs, where is it located? Because certain images are coming to my head. I keep seeing certain statues in Assam also, and where it is located. So, yeah, could you please tell us more about it?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think roughly I can think of three ways to answer this question. One is majorly the statues that I showed earlier, the bronze statues. They are placed near the political and revenue-based offices in mostly cities, which is your Delhi, Bombay, Hyderabad, that circuit. Um, and usually, when they are desecrated, there is much of the national media covering it. Whereas the other statues that I was showing, which is your artisanal, they pixelate the rural landscape in much, much more astronomical numbers. And they're also there in cities, but they're not that visible. They mostly happen to be in places where Dalit communities reside. So that is one aspect of where you find most of these statues. The other is about the specific placement of them. They are there in like semi-urban and semi-rural spaces also, in townships also. So there is not a neat sort of a distinction between rural and urban spaces. And I feel in some ways Ambedkar statues really sort of break away from our understanding of, just heteronormative ideas of urban space at the end of the day. The other is, if where are they placed, if it is a town or a village. They are mostly placed in two ways. They are placed either at the entrance of a village to mark a community inhabitation, or they are placed on a contested lands, and that land could actually be a wasteland also. It could be a land near a nala or a drain. It could be a land, which is why I was talking about the word kala patthar, which is when the first stone is put to inaugurate and install a statue. Or they could be nearby and oppositionally facing a temple. So these are the two or three main ways, and some old historic towns and villages um, have this history of hospices and Sufi shrines and small mosques and mazars. Usually these days, a statue would be nearby, since the economy of demolition makes you very aware of the hyperlocation of all of these situated next to one another. Um, So roughly, like these are the placement coordinates. Other than that, there is also this idea that I've seen that sort of affects where are they placed, which is where I have seen communities in villages really go on days about discussing where should the Ambedkar statue be looking at? Should he be pointing towards the Dalit Basti, or should he be pointing towards the temple or the other communities that are inhabiting that space? And where should the face be? Where should the body be looking? So there are also these debates, and then local vernacular media paraphernalia shows you that every year, like on Ambedkar Jayanti, there is like a hot heated debate between local community artisans about should the hand be pointing at an 80-degree angle upraised to the heaven, or should it be pointing to the direction of the parliament. So there are all these like contestations over the meaning of these gestures and the placement of a statue. And I think just the third thing that I find personally really fascinating is how most icons and the concept of, which is a very dominant concept in art, South Asian art history, which is the concept of darshan, talks about the placement of an icon or a statue in which you have to look up to revere it and to gain darshan, or how can I translate darshan, or just a visibility, an appearance of the statue. Whereas in Ambedkar statues, most of the time in these village and towns, the statue is placed at an eye level. So you look it eye to eye in the North Indian public sphere. And Dalit women have a very different relationship to the statue. There are times when we've spent, say, we've covered an incident of desecration, and then the initial commotion that happens when the police arrives is over, and then we are talking to just women, and all of us are kind of letting it loose a little after the statue has perhaps been taken away. You see Dalit women interact with the ruins in a very different way. Sometimes Dalit women have refused to repair the statue and guard the ruins as a sign of a struggle that was put up. And at other times in the night, they will go sit next to a statue, they will confide in each other. And it is not just a statue, it is the plinth and the plaque, it is the shadow of the statue. All of these together really animate a Dalit feminist ecology of emotional um, idea of what the statue does to your life and to your, self-perception. And another thing in these design and placement of Ambedkar statues is that when you go very close to them, you can really see the touch of the artisanal hand, which is missing from the very polished bronze statues. You don't see markers of labor at all. Um, and that artisanal touch of hand and labor is something that makes you feel very close to the inception of the statue, and the relationship, therefore, that Dalit communities have is, I think, for me, extremely democratic and secular, and also religious at the end of the day. It is simply not just iconographic or religious. Um, I hope I answered that.
Yes, yes, exactly. Thank you so much. Very insightful.
Hi, Atika. I'm Dina. Yeah, am I audible enough?
Yes.
Yeah, actually, like when we were talking about Dalit women and their relation with the iconography of Babasaheb, I could also see, and when the question from Assam has come, I think I just wanted to share that last year, 2025 May, CM of Assam has declared that Babasaheb statue will be installed near the yeah, like it was declared in a very pompous way, and it was said that within 6 months that statue will be built, and it would be completely formed in 15th August 2025. But till now we have not seen the statue is built or not. So I felt like it is also like talks about like regions which has not seen, even with the presence of Dalits, it has not seen that seen that value of Babasaheb's cultural side. Yeah, I mean, this is heartening, but yeah, it is also a true face of, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I think there's something wrong with my laptop camera. But I heard your full question, and I feel what you're saying is absolutely like politically astute and right, because most of the time, the claims to inaugurate an Ambedkar statue or to establish and install an Ambedkar statue by government officials and bureaucrats is a matter of simply vote garnering and weaponizing the deep attachment that Dalit communities have to statues, and how much celebration and joy a statue can just enable by its sheer existence. And that sort of an understanding I've seen pervade from the Hindi heartland to other areas of India, to other regions, where honestly Ambedkar iconography is more of an imposition than a celebration, and the trend is more local and new and emerging than historical, which is why I call it an imposition. Which is also something that is interesting as it's unfolding with other things that are happening around us, including land grab in the northeast, and ecological devastation all around us. So I think holistically, if we were to look at why iconographic claims have become so virulent, um, there are other factors that also allow us to understand the latching on to Ambedkar's iconography by state officials, especially right wing Hindu officials. Okay, there is another question by Jessica in the chat, and she's saying, can you say little more about the artisan themselves, which art tradition they draw from, and how are they trained? Have they passed on their knowledge? Are some also trained as artisans? And also, any plans to build a digital archive of all these local statues and the artists and communities by documenting their sense of sacredness and beauty? Um, Thank you, Jessica, for the question. I would say that I came to the artisanal aspect of my research later. I covered the land and the legal and the labor part before I came to the artisanate world. And this world is honestly way more complicated for me to understand, simply because of the attachment that caste communities have had with traditional occupations, say traditional polluted occupations, say like leather making. And only recently I have come to understand that all of this nexus that impinges upon the self definition of Dalit artisanal communities has happened at a much later stage during the colonial time, and it wasn't a natural connection between the two. So, working with leather, working with certain animals, working with certain material that is deemed polluted, which informs artisanal world, needs a little more interrogation and definitely also a little more reading on my end. But what I can tell you right now is a couple of things on the artisans. One thing is that most of these communities are daily wage laborers and agricultural communities. So their first they don't self-define themselves primarily as artisans. The first definition they have of themselves is as daily wage laborers and agriculture workers. And most of them are also landless laborers on farmlands that other castes own, and they don't draw from a particular art tradition, except there is a coterie of vernacular art traditions that depend on climate modes, and in the sense of the artisanal community in a particular part in Uttar Pradesh that borders the river Yamuna, which will know which clay to use during what season to build the armature of an Ambedkar statue. And it is from this ancestral knowledge that their traditions are drawn from, especially as they work with local material like, say, clay, cement, iron. And most of their processes of casting and molding are also something that they have not learned in a factory. So there is no training aspect. Instead, they have orally been passed down. But there are like, what really concerns me is that in around 2015, the Modi government had passed a law that ensured that hereditary occupations and child labor becomes less criminalized, so children can continue on the hereditary occupation of their parents and their family communities, say cobbler. And through that, it becomes difficult to then understand exactly how the knowledge form has been passed while not making a community complicit in their own marginalization, as Nitin was also trying to tell us. So there is always, a double edged sword in these precarious life worlds that we go interact with. But what has really fascinated me, apart from just how they're passing on the knowledge and how they like really insist on making a different, very subversive sartorial Ambedkar come alive, is the insistence to come back and make another and to make a statue despite knowing that it will be desecrated. So, making the cage before you design the statue. So, the knowledge of desecration is implicit in the conceivement of the statue. That has really fascinated me. And I think I've not really come across any other such instances in other cultures where protective measures have to be thought of before you even design and conceive of a iconographic cultural pride marker for yourself. Um, that's one thing. And I think the other part that is just that a lot of this knowledge forms have been lost, which is why I said a lot of this micro history is yet to be written. Like, say, knowledge about stone masonry, knowledge about inlay work, knowledge about steel armature crafting. These have been lost to us. Um, and they perhaps survive in some archive, which is not your traditional archive, but I am yet to, um, I'm yet to go there. And whatever I have seen so far is what I've seen the communities make and communities defend. But also, increasingly, there is a generational shift in the idea of artisanal self fashioning, where younger communities would rather go to Agra and like Jaipur and buy a bronze gold looking statue of Ambedkar than make one. So there are also those other shifts that animate this artisanal world for us. That is true, Alok. Many laborers do return from cities and they make statues with cement and other materials like that. But the debate, I think, that is employed on the use of cement is that um, if you're calling a statue artisanal and vernacular, cement is still a modern material. So where does that put the statue as? Statue is artisanal, but the material is modern and the crafting technology is ancestral and historic. So I think this there is no neatly slotted value, which is why an Ambedkar statues remain a very non-hegemonic, isomorphic forms when it comes to an art historical aesthetic uh, definitional project of Ambedkar's very broadly, like Ambedkarite iconography, Ambedkarite anti-caste aesthetics.
Is there any more questions or? I think we should stop here. Uh, Thank you so much, Atika, for a very insightful discussion session. Now, I would like to invite Janvi to conclude the session.
Hello everyone. So yeah, first of all, thank you so much, Aatika, for that very compelling and thought-provoking talk. So with all the images of Ambedkar statues that you shared, the video, everything, which was across different landscapes. It reminded us that every statue is not just a monument; it's a claim, and it's a claim to a land, to public space, to history, and more importantly, to belonging. So when a statue is attacked or desecrated, it is not just vandalized, but also it's an act of power. So yeah, thank you so much for bringing your research to us, and thank you everyone for being with us this evening. And we really hope that you that this conversation stays with you all, and you continue to inspire and reflect upon this. With this, we would like to see you for our next session, which will be on 9th of April, day after tomorrow, taken up by Pradnil on fourth industrial revolution, which is robotics, cyber system, and AI. So yeah, see you all for the next session. Thank you so much. Good night, Jerry.
Jai Bhim, bye.